This is JC one more time. As you can see, I put on my poetry reading hat for this chapter. This will be chapter 8 of my book entitled Todd. I don't want to, look too much exactly alike in every one of them. So somebody said you need to do something different once in a while. So I did. I put this hat on. This. See, this is not a real feather, but it could be one. It looks kind of like a real feather. So anyhow, without further ado, I'll go on. Now, I should explain too, this chapter 8, excuse me, will be the last chapter in part 1 of the book entitled Todd, and it'll be sort of a little bit explanatory right at the end. So just go ahead and listen to it all the way through and pay attention. And so, anyhow, without further ado, I'll begin now. This is chapter 8 of my book entitled Todd. It was indeed nap time for Mom and for Todd too. He couldn't remember feeling this tired ever before in his young life. He listened very intently, trying to hear any sound coming from his mother's bedroom. He heard none. He walked to her door and rapped gently. Her voice came back very softly. "I'm okay, son. Get some sleep." Todd felt better now. Todd was tired, but he knew there were things that needed to be done before he slept. There were other relatives to be called as well as close friends. He reached for the phone just as it rang. "Hello," a voice came over the line. "Oh, Todd, I'm so sorry to hear what happened." It was an aunt on his mother's side, Aunt Lola May. She lived across town. "I was just going to call you," Todd said. "How did you find out?" Aunt Lola May said she heard it on the local radio newscast. "I can't believe it. Not the way it was reported," she said. "Bobby would never kill himself. That's crazy." "It's true, Aunt Lola," said Todd. Dad had been very depressed since Uncle Carl and Aunt Teresa were killed. Aunt Lola said she would come over, but Todd told her no. His mom was asleep now. He assured her that he could handle things here for now. They'd see her tomorrow. Maybe she could bring some food so Mom wouldn't feel she needed to cook. Aunt Lola agreed, and they said their goodbyes and hung up the phones. Todd made a few more calls, staying as brief as possible, then decided to go to sleep. He'd sleep on the pull-out sofa tonight, fully dressed except for his shoes, to be here and ready in case anything unexpected happened. Todd had just dozed off when the phone rang. He started to not answer it, but changed his mind and picked up the receiver. "Oh, Todd, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." Her voice was very soft and gentle and obviously very emotional. He knew it could only be Les. "Don't cry, my dear little girl," he said. "Please don't cry. I have to talk to you as soon as possible. Les, please don't allow yourself to become too emotional about all this. There are things you don't know. Things I should have told you before we became so close to each other." There was a moment of silence. Then Les said, "What do you mean, Todd? Is something wrong? You can't be kidding at a time like this." Todd was silent for a moment. Then he took a very deep breath and he let it out slowly. "Les, we need to talk. Can you meet me somewhere tonight?" "Yes, of course I can." "Where would you like to meet me?" "Anywhere is okay with me." "How about the park?" said Todd. "We can meet at the bench or sit in my car, whichever you prefer." "All right, I'll park at the edge of the park and maybe we can walk and talk. Maybe one last trip together to our park bench, okay?" "Les, no. It's all right. I can tell when I'm being dumped." "I'll see you in half an hour." Les gently set the receiver back on its base and gave a little sigh. "It just couldn't have been that good," she murmured. Todd quietly checked on his mom. She was sound asleep, and he left her a note on the coffee table telling her where he was going. He didn't explain why, just that he would explain it all later. Todd pulled up beside Les' car. She had arrived a few minutes earlier and was sitting in her car waiting for him. He got out and walked around to her driver's side. The window was down and he said, "Hi." Les looked up at him and said, "Well, So far, so good. Now do I become all emotional and say, you don't have to tell me, you're married and you have children? Todd reached down and opened the door for her. He said, no, it's nothing like that. But I want to apologize before I say anything else. I'm sorry I wasn't honest with you from the beginning. They started walking toward the concrete bench, their bench. He talking and she listening, waiting for the other shoe to drop, so to speak. I love you very much, but I used bad judgment and made a huge mistake. I was so drawn to you and attracted to you. It was so wonderful that I allowed everything to go too far between us. I've never been in love before, but I fell in love with you, but this just can't happen. Todd, you haven't said anything yet. You're just rambling. Please get to whatever point you're trying to make. Todd could see Les was becoming agitated now, waiting for him to say what was becoming harder and harder for him to say. They came to the bench and Todd sat down. He patted the seat next to him and said, would you like to sit down? There's plenty of room. It wasn't funny. Tears started from Les' eyes and she began to cry. Todd jumped to his feet and grabbed her and started to wrap his arms around her, but she stiffened and pushed him back roughly. Is this some sort of fucking joke? She asked. If it is, it's not funny. Now say what you have to say and get it over with. Todd stepped back and dropped his arms to his side, visibly shaken by Les's reaction. Then he sat back down and said, please sit down. After a brief hesitation, Les sat on the bench. She looked into his eyes and then looked down at the ground. I don't know if there's any good way to tell you about myself, so I'll just say it. I'm 12 and a half years old, 6 or 7 years younger than you. There was a few seconds of complete silence. Neither of them did more than just breathe for several seconds. Les appeared stunned, unable to respond, just looking steadily into Todd's eyes. It was quickly becoming more and more awkward for both of them. Todd knew he had to speak. He said, Les, please don't say anything until I'm finished. I'll make this as quick as I can. First, let me say, there's no record of any abnormality of any kind, either in my mom's or my dad's families. But when I was born, I weighed over 14 pounds, and my head was very large, much larger than it should have been. Shortly before and immediately after I was actually born, I could envision in my mind answers to questions that hadn't even been asked yet. For my first 3 months, I never cried, never smiled, never said dada, goo-goo, mama, or anything else that babies always say. Then at 3 months old, I waited for Mom and Dad to leave the room. Then I ripped 2 round rails from the side of my playpen and half walked and half crawled to Dad's recliner, and I was climbing up on it when they came back into the room. Mom fainted. Dad just stood there looking at me climbing to the recliner. You can't imagine what kind of life we lived after that and the many other crazy things that happened. I grew and developed and studied and learned incessantly and started in school at age 3. But school was so basic, I dropped out, and Mom homeschooled me. Actually, I homeschooled myself. I learned so easily that it was a simple thing to do. I never forget anything. I can read and understand a book in several minutes. It's crazy. I never had friends for obvious reasons. I would grow away from them both physically and mentally. It was simpler to just be a loner and go my own way. Until I met you. The only ones who knew about how I was were my relatives. They had no answers except just keep loving each other, so that's what we did. After I reached teenage size, I started going with my dad places. More than once we had to leave abruptly for some weird reason apparent only to us. Once I went to a ball game with my dad, and just as the batter came up to bat and started his swing, I stood up with my hands outstretched and said, I got it. Then he hit the ball straight to me. Everybody there stared at us. I told the kid it was a lucky guess, and I handed him the ball and we left. It was not too long after that my Uncle Carl and Aunt Teresa were killed in a car crash. Uncle Carl was Dad's big brother, and they had gone to many places, many games together, and did many other things together. Dad just couldn't get over Uncle Carl's death, and Aunt Teresa too, of course. This last year my growth has slowed somewhat, and I leveled off a little, more or less at the same size. Remember, you said I seemed younger the first few times you saw me, but I still will grow both physically and mentally. There's just no way to tell how much. And I'm only 12.5 years old now. Yeah, I know, said Les. 6 or 7 years younger than me. I've already heard that. Now Les raised her head up and looked at Todd. This man she had known for almost a day now. This man she had quietly to herself pledged her life to. A vow of a life together forever. Les continued. You know my name, and I'm a student at the junior college, majoring in literature. I'm 19.5 years old. I had a boyfriend once when I was 16. After 2 months, he wanted more than I'd give to him, so he dumped me. There's been no one else. My mother and father have loved each other for 24 years. They married 23 of those. I'm an only child, same as you. Well, not the same as you. I do forget things sometimes, and I have laughed a lot in my dull life. I didn't walk until I was 9 months old, and I never sat in a recliner by myself. Now, I did all that living and educating and stuff, and never told a lie. I'm a sort of normal, but a bit backward. I'm sort of normal, but a bit backward compared to your progress and development, both physically and mentally. But I'm progressing at the speed I planned to, so I think I'm doing okay. Oh, and I know when I love someone enough to commit to him forever. Does all this make sense to you? Todd answered, yes, I guess it does. So, said Les, what this boils down to is you've lived a lie. You have lied and lived a lie your entire life. And as a result of that, you're mountains above just about anyone else in the world with your looks, your intelligence, your education, your knowledge, your visions of things to come, your extraordinary understanding about both normal and celestial things, many even before they happen. One might say you are an extraordinarily gifted young man, as well as being probably the handsomest man in town, and in some ways the tenderest and most loving person anywhere. And you accomplished all this by lying about yourself. Todd, visibly taken aback, looked at his feet, not wanting to meet her eyes. I guess so. Then Les took Todd's hand between her hands and held it against her breast. He wouldn't look up at her. And Les said, Todd, what it seems that this boils down to is, here is an honest, halfway pretty girl who has never told a lie, knows exactly what she wants, and is normal in just about every way. And a younger, very handsome young man who is absolutely exceptional in every way, but who attained everything good for himself by living a lie, by cheating, and by deceit. But each knows true love when they find it. Now Todd looked up at her. He knew he was not the one to say what needed to be said next. Les took his face between her hands and kissed him gently on the lips. My dear boy, does this mean we cannot love each other and spend the rest of our lives together? Always together because I've never told a lie and you're younger than me? Baby boy, that is such crap. I would love you just as much and spend the rest of my life with you, even if you were older than me, and even if I had to lie to do it. And there was the sound of hoof, and Todd said, hold it, sweetie. This ain't no bear you're hugging. And Les gave Todd the biggest kiss he ever had, but nowhere near the last. Todd looked at his watch and said, oh, Mom's by herself, still sleeping, I hope. Les took his hand and started toward their cars. Then come on, baby boy. Let's go home. And they did. And they lived happily ever after. I hope you enjoyed part one of my new book, Todd. There will be more to come, but probably only after part one has been thoroughly absorbed. Let me know what you think. And thank you very much. This is JC.